Thank you so much for coming today. We really appreciate your attendance. We want to give a great big thank you to Pastor Matt Penzinger. You want to say a few words?
Sure. So Laura just handed me these books that you all, the Historical Society, came across. This is a history of the first 25 years of Grace Lutheran Church on its silver anniversary in 1893. So we've been here for a little while. And then this one is a book that was written by Reverend Henry Clay Holloway, who was a pastor of Grace Lutheran Church in those early days, about his travels in Europe. So I very much appreciate having these. Our library has a little historical display over there, and these will become a part of it. So thank you very much. We're so glad to have the Historical Society here for these box lunch talks. And here in the heat of summer, I hope you all stay cool, enjoy your lunch, and enjoy the talk. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Pastor Matt. Okay, quick thank you to our sponsors for the talk today. Deborah Bowers, Diane Betcher, Dolores Snyder, Corinne Corpus, and Axe Fairhaven, they're in the back there. And we just want to say, if you do want to sponsor a talk, if you see one that you're interested in, you can either give me a call or you can sign up on the website. A few quick things about some events that we have coming up real quick. On July 16th, which is tomorrow, we have a Carroll 250 speaker, Finding the Maryland 400. It's Owen Laurie, and he wrote a book about the Maryland 400, which, if you haven't heard about it, come by tomorrow and see it. It's not going to be at Exploration Commons. It actually changed places. It'll be at the Tawnytown branch of the library from 6 to 7 tomorrow. And then we have History Fest coming up on July 26th, and if you don't know what that is, you need to stop by. A lot of the historic sites from Carroll County, Union Mills, Strawbridge Shrine, Tawnytown, a lot of them will be there. We have the Westminster Fire Department Museum will also be there, and they are bringing an antique fire truck. Steve Bowersox, who couldn't be here today, but he will be doing World War II walks up and down Main Street. We have quite a bit happening that day, so we would love to see you. It's from 11 to 3 on the 26th. And now I'm going to introduce Lynn Wheeler, who needs no introduction. She's going to introduce these handsome gentlemen over here. Thank you very much.
Well, Laura, thank you again for your excellent work, and thanks to you and all of the volunteers who put this on and do a wonderful job. And I want to thank all of you for being here today. Hey John, hey Sharon. It's fabulous to see everybody. We're delighted that you're here, and we're very excited about our presentation today. So I know this is a busy time, and thank you all for being here, and thank you very much to the sponsors. Okay, you see our first slide there. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce our two illustrious speakers. You hear me okay? Bernard Jones is the past treasurer of the Carroll County branch of the NAACP, a past member of the directors of Union National Bank, and on the advisory board of New Windsor State Bank. He is the past president of Westminster Kiwanis and past president of the Carroll Community College Foundation Board of Directors, on which he served for 22 years. He is chair of the Scholarship Review Committee for the Community Foundation of Carroll County. He also serves on the board of the Historical Society of Carroll County and the Agricultural Land Preservation Foundation. He was also appointed by Governor Glendening to serve on the Maryland Affordable Housing Association. Bernie grew up in New Windsor, graduated from the Robert Moton High School, and attended Morgan State University. He started his engineering career at Black & Decker on the team that created the moon drill to take core samples when astronauts landed on the moon in 1969. He followed that with a 38-year career working on the Trident nuclear submarine program, which took him around the world. John T. Willis is a distinguished attorney, professor, author, and public servant with deep roots in Westminster, dating to 1780s. He graduated from Westminster High School and went on to earn a BA in economics from Bucknell University and a JD from Harvard Law School, specializing in constitutional law. After 7 years with the U.S. Army, he returned to Westminster and opened a law practice. John served as Secretary of State of Maryland from 1995 to 2003 under Governor Glendenning. From 2015 to 2023, he was the senior counsel to the Maryland Attorney General. In 2000, John led U.S. Census efforts in Maryland. He has held countless leadership roles on commissions and boards in Maryland, including the Military Monument Commission, the Maryland Civil War Heritage Commission, on the Board of Trustees for the Maryland Historic Trust, task force to study the history and legacy of slavery in Maryland, as well as commissions on election reform, redistricting, and nonprofit sector development. He is a senior executive in residence at the University of Baltimore's College of Public Affairs. These powerhouse men played roles in the late 60s and 70s in developing and carrying out the work of HOPE, Housing Opportunity Purchase Effort in Carroll County, a nonprofit devoted to purchasing, renovating, and providing affordable housing for Blacks. Today, they will share the history of HOPE and its impact. First, a little background. While the ratification of the 13th Amendment abolishing slavery on December 6, 1865, was a gigantic step forward in the history of this country, it was done with little to no regard for the well-being of 4 million enslaved people who were freed. The societal structures available to millions of white people, namely property ownership, housing, jobs, and educational opportunities, were not readily available to Blacks, nor, with few exceptions, could Blacks vote. It would take another century for the 1964 Civil Rights Act to be enacted, which prompted significant changes nationally. Even then, implementation was slow due to long-held racist beliefs and behaviors. For the most part, it was Black people themselves who took the lead in ensuring that there would be schools for their children and aid for the poor, whether with the help of Freedmen's Bureau or through their own traditions of mutual support rooted in American culture and centuries of African culture and centuries of slavery and oppression in America. The Freedmen's Bureau assisted in the establishment of at least 11 schools in Frederick County, 7 in Washington County, and 3 in Carroll County. In his books on the Reconstruction era, Eric Foner, Pulitzer Prize-winning author and professor emeritus at Columbia University, described the Black church, schools, and benevolent societies as, quote, key institutions of Black America that not only supported Blacks through the daily struggles of the late 19th century, but also became the springboards for action in future struggle. Black landowners played a key role in establishing church and schools, which became the heart of these communities. Churches often doubled as schools and meeting places, fostering education and mutual aid. Black Civil War veterans often played important roles in the development of local institutions. Many served on church or school as church and school trustees. There were Black communities established in Carroll County prior to 1865. Crossroads of War and Freedom, an excellent website funded by the Heart of the Civil War Heritage Area with support of the National Endowment for the Humanities and the National Park Service and Frederick Community College, and featuring the work of contributors such as HSCC's own distinguished historian, Marianne Ashcraft, outline the history of Black communities and includes a table of 1870 U.S. Census data, which shows that the total Black population in Carroll County was 2,175 in the 1870s, spread out through 11 districts. The most populous were the Westminster District with a population of 558, Freedom District with a population of 531, and New Windsor District with a population of 292. In 1864, the Black community on Union Street District in Westminster, which of course is adjacent to now McDaniel College, was a hub for Black educators, laborers, and civil rights advocates. According to the Historic Site Inventory form completed for the Maryland Historical Trust in 1977 by Christopher Weeks, a consultant hired by the city of Westminster, Union Street was laid out by Isaac Shriver, who purchased the property in 1834. The inventory describes the buildings constructed on Union Street and notes that the buildings were most likely there to house the city's free Black population. In her essay on the early pioneers, Mary Shellman wrote that after Isaac Shriver bought the property, he created a street to connect Pennsylvania and West Main Streets, named it Union Street, and laid out a number of building lots along the street. Speculators bought the lots and built houses. By the mid-1870s, a map of the street showed a schoolhouse and a 15 to 20 dwelling units. A schoolhouse, a church, and 15 to 20 dwelling units. Over time, Western Maryland College purchased or was deeded ownership of a number of the properties on Union Street. By the 1960s, the houses on Union Street were old and in need of significant renovation. Next slide, please. My friend Joyce Muller sent me these wonderful, wonderful photos from the Library of Congress collection showing the houses on Union Street, which I assume is what it looked like, Bernie, when Hope got started. Correct? Okay, first, Bernie, you were a founding member of Hope. And can you turn, yeah, you got it on. You were a founding member of Hope. Can you tell us how it evolved? What was the state of housing for Blacks in Carroll County? Who were the partners involved and who were the founders?
Well, the housing situation in Carroll County at that time was basically the same as housing situations across the United States, except for your large corporate cities, and your large corporate cities had segregated sections where the Blacks lived, and normally that was next to the schools or universities and so forth. But back to Westminster, these houses on Union Street were built a long, long time ago. And I guess over the course of time, the owners were probably worked at the college or had something to do with the college, and when they left, they just gave them to college, presumably. But when we got calls from residents stating that they were having problems paying their rent and were being threatened to be evicted, I guess some of the local residents talked to the pastors within the Union Street area, Church of the Brethren, and even here. At that time, I was just a young kid out of school, trying to make a living, and there was a pastor at Westminster Church of Brethren. It was then he was an assistant pastor, Reverend Don Frank, and he coerced me into getting involved because I lived nearby. we were told that the houses that the people were being evicted from were owned by Western Maryland College. So Reverend Johnson, Roy Johnson, who was the pastor of Church of the Brethren, Pinckney Corsa, church down by the courthouse, they all got involved, and we talked to John Willis, and he said he knew Dr. John, who was president of the college, and said we'd go out and talk to him. And we did. And John, you can tell what happened then.
Well, Bernie, before we go to John, it was, I think, you said Donald Frank was involved too, right? And he was at Westminster
Yes.
Methodist Church, yeah. Bernie, what were the first properties to be renovated?
Well, the first property to be renovated, the group decided to do number 2 and number 4 Union Street. And we thought were in the worst condition, but they were in a condition that the group could renovate them. And thankfully, the citizens of Carroll County, Westminster, New Winter, pastors, everyone got involved, and the kids from the high schools, they carried the trash out, dumping in trucks and all. So that's how we got started. We renovated number 2 and number 4 at Union Street.
After that, what was your next property?
The next property,
Next slide.
this was 20 and 21 Main Street in Union Bridge. That one was basically about the same as the one on Union Street. And the Votech Center, those kids, I guess they got credit for it. But a friend of mine from college, we took our pickup trucks and we were hauling stuff that was torn out of the houses to the dumps, and they kept us busy. But I'm proud to say that 20 and 21 Main Street and Union Bridge is now still currently owned by family members that moved into that facility back in the 60s.
Bernie, tell us about the work you did on McKinstry Mill Road. Next slide.
McKinstry Mill Road, that was individual homes built in, I'm not sure of the year, but these were properties that were financed through the Farmers Home Administration. Farmers Home Administration was a government-funded project, corporation, I guess, or company. Yeah, part of the Department of Agriculture, and what their job was to provide funding for housing for low income in the farmland country. They didn't do anything in the incorporated populated cities, it was just in the farmland. So our group talked to the Farmers Home Administration, and that's how we got financing for 4 homes there on McKinstry Mills Road.
And they're still looking good today.
Yeah.
Bernie, there were some other people involved in similar efforts. Can you tell people a little bit about Fry Diggs? Next slide.
Well, Fry Diggs, I called him an entrepreneur person because back in the day, he was a collector of bottles. He would go around through the county, collect the old beer and whiskey bottles, and he made a lot of money off of them because a lot of them were old bottles was worth something. But he was a very conscientious person, and he wanted to do something. He had
Next slide.
he built a restaurant bar on Algersburg Alley, which I'm not even sure what the name of the street is now. But he built that. It was a club. back in the 50s. And it was basically for anyone would go there, but it was basically built for the blacks. And then he saw what was going on in Union Street, and he talked to Bob and Phyllis Scott, that he wanted to do something. And I guess between them and some other people, they built I think it was 20 townhouses on Center Street.
Again, this is Union Street today, so you can see that's quite a difference. And those properties are really, very nice housing today. Next slide. Here's another one of Union Street today. Next slide. This one recently redone, looks great. Okay, next slide. Now this was the office, right, Bernie? This was the Office of Hope.
Yes, that was the office that when we built the first section of the townhouses, we built an office there for the corporation. We would meet there. And then the back part of the office is the laundry facility. And that building is still being used, and they still have the laundry facilities there for the tenants.
Now, Bernie, this one is Charles Street. This was the last property that Hope did, correct?
Yes, this was 4 townhouses built at Church Street, Ralph Street, and Charles Street. And after that, we couldn't keep members, and we ended up selling the corporation to Interfaith Housing.
Wonderful. Now we're going to go to the next slide. This is Fry Diggs' home, which he built on Center Street. And then he built go to the next slide, please. This is fascinating, Bernie. You want to talk about what was on the tot lot when Fry had it?
Oh, well, where this tot lot is right now, that's where he had his bar and restaurant. And you can see the townhouses that Mr. Diggs and the Scotts built, and they're keeping them up. I'm not sure who owns them now, but they're in pretty decent shape. So where his club was, I guess, I'm not sure who put that up, but there's a tot lot there, and it's in really great shape. It's really nice.
Now, the restaurant that Fry Diggs opened was very important because blacks were not able to go into any of the restaurants in Westminster when he built it, right, Bernie?
Well, not only Westminster, the rest of the United States.
Yeah. So the role that played was critical to this community, correct?
Oh, yeah. Well, I never went there. I was too young.
Yes, but he did allow boys to go in there and play pool.
I guess.
And he also had, if you can imagine, the Colts, Lenny Moore, and some other guys that went there because they couldn't go in it anywhere either. It seems impossible for young people in the audience to imagine that, but that's the way it was. Okay, thank you, Bernie. And now, John, next slide, please. You were very, very, very involved in the development of Hope after you came back from the Army in the 70s. So this is a slide of the Articles of Incorporation key purpose statement. Would you talk a little bit about the Articles of Incorporation and your involvement?
Well, am I on? I'm on.
Yeah.
Great. First of all, thank you to the Historical Society for sponsoring this event, and I looked at your program, and there's a number of others I may need to come listen to. And I want to thank Jim Leitner, who had me here, I think, 12 years ago to talk about a book I did called Presidential Elections in Maryland that my wife says is a cure for insomnia, because it has all the data by county back to 1789 and voter registration back to the 1880s when we started keeping voter registration. But anyway, that's when I grew up in Westminster, although I my father was in the Army in the 50s and 60s, so we would move in and out. But the family roots here are very deep. And I had when I came back to open my law office after 7 years as an officer in the JAG Corps in the Army during the Vietnam era, Westminster, and a lot of the work that the ministers and Bernie and a whole group of activists, and I know Phyllis and Bob Scott and the Hartmans, and there were college professors and community people supportive of what was going on. One of the visions, and I grew up here, right, was when Center Street got extended to reach to the hospital, it exposed a whole series of outhouses on Charles Street. So all the houses did not have water and sewer. City services were not extended, and this happened around the country. City services were not available to the minority population. And so that became a revelation to it opened your eyes to the discrimination that was occurring in your own hometown. And I stopped, the neighborhood was Holton, took a picture of it. I didn't find it for this presentation, but it was quite startling. So I came back to town with a social conscience, at least being awakened a little bit. And when many of the friends that I had were involved, and when the Bernie and the Hope Group came and asked my assistance, I started doing some legal work for them from my office down on 226 East Main Street. And when the idea emerged from the Hope people about going to the college, I said, well, we can do that. I mean, I know Dr. John. I had done work at the college. Everybody in my family except me went to the college back. My grandmother graduated in 1913, my father in 1934, my mother in 35, my brother in 64, and aunts and uncles and cousins and all kinds of people. But I was a townie and left town because my father was actually in charge of the physical plant, and he would supervise and maintain and collect rents from people on Union Street. So I was very familiar with the area and with the property, and it was very willing to provide assistance to the group. And so we sat down and negotiated with the college and obtained a purchase agreement to acquire the properties. Of course, the question was, how do we pay for it? I don't know, Lynn, I have a tendency, you ask me a question.
No,
One
yes,
thing you
please
did not
yes.
tell me, Lynn, in preparation is all the fact checkers I have in the audience here. I got former mayors, I got the planning director, I got the Parks and Rec guy, I got...
Well, John, tell us about how you did get the funding to do these projects.
Well, Hope had some experience with Farmers Home Administration, and when we first approached Farmers Home about this larger project, we ended up borrowing almost $900,000 from the Farmers Home Administration, and they were first a little reluctant to take on the scale of this project, and one of the reasons was that you could identify, well, you might have to demolish houses, and then we don't know if the Maryland Historic Trust will let you demolish any of these decrepit houses, and you might have to do a survey. And so the city of Westminster, and I want to thank my hometown of Westminster, and you probably have written about this a little bit in so many of your columns, but the city of Westminster was again, using a grant, and everybody who's at Westminster should read Chris Weeks's book, The Building of Westminster, which details the origin of properties that you're familiar with up and down the street. So Chris did this narrative of Union Street, which traced the origin of the properties and the current condition of it, which we then used as a basis for our application process with the loan. what happens, any complex real estate transaction takes years. So we started the conversation with Farmers Home and with the college, and finally we had a notice of intent. Bernie signed so many papers in the 1970s and 80s, I'm not sure. I have a box of them out in the car here, but Bernie was signing everything to apply for the loan, the purchase agreement with the college, and the legal part of this took about 2.5 years or so. We applied in 1980. We had our first settlement with Farmers Home in the October, I think the right date is October 27, 1981. Had a second settlement for additional cost overruns and the equipment that was going, the utilities and appliances going into the units in December '82. So it was a process. In the end, of course, everybody was very appreciative of what had happened, but it was a transformation of the street. One of the successes of it was maintaining, not everybody who had been living there remained, but a significant portion of people who had been living there were able to move into the units and are still there today. And Bernie and I have personal relationships. I mean, Bernie grew up in a segregated school system. I was on, Bernie's a little older than I am. I grew up.
Look at here.
Yeah. But I grew up when the schools were just beginning to be desegregated in the 1950s, when the first black Little League players played, 57, 58, and in fact, my teammates, Mike Squirrel has family on Union Street, and the same thing in high school. It wasn't a quick 1954 Brown versus Board of Education. Everybody went to school the next year at the same school. No, it took fully about 11 years from the Brown versus Board to have the school system integrated in Carroll County and in Westminster. So anyway, it was against that backdrop, with personal knowledge, that this became, somewhat labor of love to acquire this financing. And Farmers Home was reluctant, but they're very proud of it back in the 19 when we finally broke ground.
If we could go to the next slide, please. John, this is a population data chart, as you know, that you created, that shows what the population was. Do you want to talk a little bit about the, black population historically in Carroll County?
Yeah, this is, I'm a consumer of census data. Literally a consumer. Ned Cumin, planning director, you was a basis of an awful lot of what you did and the good work that you did here for years. But people talk, Carroll County was not what you think it was, is the point of this slide. When Carroll County was formed, we weren't formed until 1840. And when we were formed, we had, this slide doesn't show, but we had 1,044 slaves in the county, and the population was 17,000. That means 1 out of 17 people was a slave. That's a big number. And the black population was in double digits at that time. But this census data, which I got out of the official census records, shows you how the population has changed over the years. So in 1850, very tumultuous time in this country's history, the black population in the county was 9.45%. And what's interesting about it is half the people were enslaved and half the people were free. The 1850 census, it's a quite remarkable number. 975 people primarily on tobacco farms and other agricultural pursuits in the southern part of the county, but then in Westminster area, agricultural and domestic servants as well, but an equal number of free blacks. So when you think about the history, you can't think of it all in one way, because the free blacks, which have been in Maryland since the founding of this country, had moved out here primarily out Liberty Road corridor. You know, if you've ever visited, you should visit the Benjamin Banneker Douglas Park in Baltimore County. You know, a very prominent Marylander who was engaged in intellectual pursuit and farming and political pursuits. And so this tracks the percentages. You notice you jump up, you did a little more years in there, but you notice it goes from 9.5 to 1950, where it's post-World War II is 4.6%. But then it was, you say, well, how did Carroll County get really white? It got white in all the white flight out of Baltimore City. This caused but the tremendous population growth of the 70s and 80s, and so we went down by year 2000 to only 2.5%. Now, what's interesting, to me at least, in doing the research for this project, is the largest increases in black population have occurred in the last 20 years. So we have, now, Bernie, I know a lot of these people who have moved in. They are professionals, they're teachers, they're scientists, they're all occupations. But the biggest growth was 10 to 20, where we had over 1,500 African black families move into the county. Another 1,150 from 10 to 20. But they're still primarily focused in the southern part of the county in the Westminster area. And they don't really have the housing needs. A lot of the new people coming in don't have the same housing needs as the people whose families have been here forever. Anyway, I can answer questions on any of that, but there's I think it's important. The other perspective, I think, Lynn, you and I mentioned earlier over the last week, was we need to understand what was happening in the country during each of these periods. And so in the 60s, I'm looking at the audience, and a lot of you remember the 60s, and a lot of things happened in the 60s. The civil rights movement, the assassinations in 1968, the disturbances. We changed America. So we got the Civil Rights Act finally passed. And there was other Civil Rights Acts passed in the previous, but the 1964 Civil Rights Act was critical to attacking discrimination in public accommodations, and then subsequent acts under Johnson's Great Society in the 60s propelled government action to finally address some historic discrimination, both by government and in the private sector. And so that the professional class here in Carroll County were riding that national wave. And that national wave, Bernie was a student at Morgan from what? You graduated Morgan 64, along with Richard Dixon, another person we should mention.
He graduated before me.
Yeah, he was a but when you get around 80, that every year that you are behind somebody you are in college is a big space of time, you know. But anyway, the point is that there was a lot going on, and that we may not have been the epicenter of a lot of that activity, but we felt it in both ways. We felt it in terms of the actions of the community activists, social activists, religious support, educational institutions, and also by the reaction to what other people were having by why did they come here? So our modern Carroll County reputation isn't based on the existence of what we were in the 1880s, but more in the 1980s. And it's really not. I did an article for the Carroll County Times 40 years ago about, looking at history through rose-colored glasses. History is not always the way you think it was. And at the height of the railroad, Carroll County was larger than Montgomery County in population because of the active railroads that we had in here. And a lot of the population was moving along with the economic connections and the transportation routes. And so, anyway, we could map it all out, but we don't have time.
Well, thank you very much for that. Very interesting. And also, I just want to point out that Dr. Melanie Nielsen's here. She did a superb talk in May about property ownership and brought up another issue, which is sometimes, John, blacks were given property, but then were at times lost their property through, in this case, the Catholic Church assuming it. So it's an excellent box lunch talk. It's on our site. But now we have these two fonts of knowledge here. So I'm going to open it up to the audience to ask any questions you would like. And Laura, we'll take one of these mics.
I'm looking at my notes here, and I want to say this before we get into Q&A, although I'm free, I can stay all afternoon. I did want to give a shout out to the City of Westminster. Because part of our ability to move forward, Lynn discovered in the paper archives a county commissioner meeting from the early 70s where they refused, even though Scott Bair made a motion to give Hope a grant of $4,000 or $5,000, the other commissioners didn't second it, and it failed. So the county was a little bit reluctant to support, but since the properties were in Westminster, the City of Westminster controlled the land use of the properties, and our ability to deal with the city was extraordinary. They not only commissioned a lot of the historic trust information, we were able to negotiate certain easements and certain kinds of land transfers. But the city did a great job. Donald Dell, John Dutter, the staff at your predecessors at the city, the mayor and council did a great job. And it was because we didn't have to deal with the county anymore. We just dealt with the city. Sorry, Ned. Ned was great. I mean, he's the best planning director in the state, but he had to deal with his elected officials all the time.
We all understand that. There's one more slide that I would like, if you would put that up, Jan. These are two books that you might find interesting. This one, Maryland Politics and Government, was written by John in partnership with Herb Smith, and it covers, as you can see, a lot on politics in Maryland. The other one is one that John recommends as being an excellent look at the history of blacks and slavery. You want to talk about those a minute, John?
Well, it's a real irony. I've done a lot of research and spent lots of time at the Carroll County Historical Society. I had a whole room at the Maryland State Archives for a couple of years in the early 80s when I wrote the presidential book. And so my granddaughter was taking courses. She's a history major at Barnard, Columbia, just graduated a couple years ago. But she said, well, my professor wrote a book about the history of slavery in the 19th century in Maryland. And it's been sitting on my desk for a long time, and I picked it up and read it again. It's got anecdotal, remarkable stories about family life in Carroll County. And one of the things when you're saying about we had equal number of free black and slaves in the middle of the 19th century, you would have that in a family unit. So they could be living on a farm somewhere and one member of the family could be enslaved and the other person be free. And then what were the children? Well, the convoluted laws of the time. There's another book on that, on the whole issue of Maryland laws on manumission and buying your freedom. But anyway, if you're interested, that's a good resource, Kevin. I don't know if you've read it before, but it's an excellent resource. And she was a history professor, and my granddaughter took the course in serendipity. So I want to pass it on. And did you have other titles up there? Because Chris Weeks' book is good. The other one that's good, I have to give a shout out to my cousin. People politically find this very hard to believe, but your former delegate, Senator Joe Getty, who was the Chief Judge of the Maryland Court of Appeals, they renamed him to be Chief Justice, lives in Manchester. He and I are cousins. And people find that very hard to believe. But Joe is an excellent historian. And he did, when he was executive director of the Historical Society, I assume you may have this book on Carroll's heritage. And Joe did a great job of describing the early movement of people into Carroll County. And I recommend that as well, in addition to my own publications, which are more numbers-based than Joe's.
Wonderful, John. Okay, we're going to open it up to questions. Does anyone have a question they'd like to pose? Deb? Here's Deb right there.
Oh, yeah. I was surprised that you had done some projects out in the rural part of the county on McKinstry's Mill Road. Were those houses, what were their condition when you took them on as projects? Were they rented or were they abandoned or?
No, they were all vacant land, farmland, and I'm not privy as to how they got the land, but through Farmers Home Administration, they were built from the ground up. They weren't renovated. They were completely funded by Farmers Home Administration.
And you did all the work,
Well, John and some of the board members, they coerced, I can't remember his name, he was the head guy at the Farmers Home Administration. They were, their office was in the basement of the old post office. So it worked out good. There were some stepping stones, but we got a lot done with as little as possible distractions.
This one would be for Bernie. I wanted to ask.
Either we put you all to sleep, or
She's right here.
you're anxious for dessert.
She's right here. She's asking a question.
This is for Bernie, and I'm wondering if you are aware or part of the Friends of Robert Moton High School Museum, which is a group that are working at getting space in Westminster. They have a lot of artifacts and trying to get some space in Westminster to show these artifacts from the high school, and maybe someday it would be increased to other Negro things. And I don't know if you're aware of the people involved. A couple of the main ones go to the White Rock Church.
I am aware of that, and
Bernie, I want to give an announcement. The commissioners have given the former students and friends of Robert Moton High School the space to open the museum. So it will be open hopefully by the end of 2026, and it won't just be about the high school, it'll be about African American history in Carroll County. So
Where would the space be?
Robert Moton,
it'll be the old school.
yep, it'll be on the same floor, they're just not sure which part, but it'll be on the same floor that they're on right now.
Yes, William Hudson has been ringing my phone quite a bit, but considering my age and grandkids, I have to slow down. but I do as much as I can. We just need some of the young folks that are graduating to come back and do something. I've been trying to get my granddaughter, she's up at the University of Pittsburgh working on her master's, but she doesn't like the country. So we all have to deal with it, but I'm sure we'll be able to get something going in the old Robert Moton School, because there are a lot of memories there, and a lot of the folks in here remember playing basketball against Robert Moton in that school. So Carroll County is a good place to live, and in spite of all the differences, they're a nice group of people to work with. No one's perfect, but I'm proud to be a resident of Carroll County.
One of the themes is you can live in a society, but there could be actually two societies. And both Professor Fields in the book that we recommended, and in Professor Smith's in my book, we carry through that two Maryland theory, whether you do it politically, culturally, socially, and we are divided. And so we grew up in a divided society, but through the whole project and otherwise other projects, we've now got shared values. As time goes on, hopefully the sharing increases and the divisions, subside. We're being challenged today nationally, not so much in this state or this county, but we got to resist that. But I'm going to be positive, like Ernie, and I talk a lot. Corinne's been to a lot of political meetings where I talk, and I'm confident long range that unity beats division, even though division sometimes wins.
So first of all, it's such a pleasure to be here with two of my mentors on stage. You may not want to take credit for me, but you should. And mentioning Bob and Phyllis Scott as well. That's just wonderful. So I came to the Hill in 1972, and we were told that Union Street was where the blacks lived. Might have used a different term back then, and I don't mean a pejorative, but, and that we could park our cars there because, it was close to campus and we weren't supposed to have cars. But then I learned that Stony Willis was going to give us a ticket if we parked anywhere that we weren't supposed to park. But I guess my question is, the college is known for giving scholarships to employees. And my understanding was a lot of those people that lived on Union Street did work in the food service and the other things on campus. Did their kids get scholarships to the college? And maybe Jim Leitner has some insight on this too.
We have an expert in the audience on that. I don't know if Jim, you've written about that at all. Yeah, there was formal and informal arrangements, I guess you'd say, with a lot of the workers on Union Street. But the college has done a wonderful job in the last 10 years or more, and from your service and alumni affairs up there, they've done a great job in diversifying the campus. It wasn't diversified when my brother went there. Some of the first black members that went to the college in the early 60s, were classmates of my brother. I'm looking around the audience to see if other college graduates from that era, but.
Well, Joyce Muller is here, who played a huge role.
There she is.
And there's no doubt that McDaniel has played a tremendous role in bringing wonderful diversity of ideas, races, and it's played such a huge role. And I would submit that has greatly strengthened Westminster. Joyce, did you have anything you want to add? No, but anybody who goes on campus knows very well that McDaniel has really done a wonderful job of encouraging and giving scholarships and bringing a very diverse student population to Carroll County. So They deserve a lot of credit. Yeah, correct.
If you haven't been on campus to see the Black Student Union Clubhouse, it gives the history of the integration of McDaniel College. So
Can you use a mic because we're recording this?
So on campus, there's a Black Student Union club room that just was formally reopened, and it has panels that give the history of the first Black students at McDaniel or Western Maryland and the history. And I would strongly suggest as history buffs that it's a small, just one room, but it's worth a visit.
And also, Carroll Community College, we have Steve Wantz here, and the community college has also done a superb job of bringing diversity and helping students to succeed in Carroll County. So I think the colleges were very fortunate in this community. Wendy?
So what year were the houses built on Union Street, and when you rehabbed them, did you find anything unusual?
You mean the original houses? The original house, I think it was right after Shriver came. He laid out the property in 1834. So I believe that those houses started as early as 1850. They were starting to be built. Speculators bought the property, and then the church was built and the school was built. And of course, the renovation also provided space for the Boys and Girls Club, right, Bernie? And but Wendy, those houses were very old. They, again, Shriver bought the property in 1834. I think he laid out, according to Chris Weeks' inventory, it was laid out by 1850. People started buying and building. So those houses, what's that?
Did they find anything unusual?
All right, Bernie, can you answer that?
What do you mean, unusual?
Because their own houses, things you would not expect.
I'm not sure. I didn't get involved with digging the dirt and all that, but I don't remember anyone bringing up anything with any historical value. Most of the basements back then were dirt basements, and they were shallow. You know, they were like 4 or 5 feet. You couldn't stand up in them. There was no plumbing. I mean, some of them had running water, but they didn't have bathrooms. You got to remember, these houses were built in the 1800s, so there were no bathrooms. But I don't know of any historical value of anything found during the construction or demolition.
We'd have to check. We had to do, under the environmental impact statement requirements from the federal government, we had to do a review of that. And I wondered, did you find anything in Chris Weeks' narrative about artifacts? But it wouldn't surprise me whether at the Maryland Historical Trust or at, as part of that process. And I didn't get a chance to go over. I didn't realize how long ago this project was till Lynn asked me to join this group. That was 45 years ago or more. But I wonder if the contractor encountered anything. We'd have to go back and ask the contractor if they encountered anything.
Well, and also a lot of the people were moving back into the houses.
Right.
Bernie, after so they had their own stuff.
But
I think, the most telling thing in the inventory that Chris Weeks wrote was, how the houses were built. That's mainly what he talked about, Wendy, the type of architecture. And it's a very interesting document, which John is kind enough to let the Historical Society make a copy of that document, Laura, so you will have it there. But it primarily describes the physical structure, what was on the street, and not much about the artifacts that may have been found. But again, the houses were lived in, the people were moving out, coming back in. So I'm not surprised. Okay, one more question, then John and Bernie will be here for questions. Anybody else have anything? Then I want to thank you all very, very much for your attention and for coming today. And John and Bernie, thank you very much for sharing the interesting history that gave our community great hope. Thank you.
And Bernie always makes me feel younger.